Hello, America. So excited to have you here today because the National Coalition of Promise Zones partners, we are so fortunate today to have not one, but 4 members of the Biden-Harris White House staff to share with us insights. These folks have carved out time from their extremely busy schedules this week. They've got budget issues happening and all sorts of different needs that demand their attention, but they prioritized us today to spend some time to help us to understand a lot about what is happening in the priorities with the Biden-Harris administration and how we might better align our work as partners in the Promise Zones with those priorities. Now, to break the ice and to prime our discussion, I'm going to introduce each of our panelists, and I'm going to follow that introduction with a little question inspired by their biography. So our first individual is Chad Maisel. He is the Director of Racial and Economic Justice with the Domestic Policy Council, which works every day to implement a comprehensive approach to advancing equity for everyone in all realms, from health to economic security, education, and safety. Chad is returning to the White House after having served with Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey as his economic policy advisor. Chad served in the Obama administration as a senior policy advisor for the White House National Economic Council and the Domestic Policy Council, where he led efforts to address things like childhood poverty and to close the digital divide. Chad is a Princeton and Emory alumni. And Chad, thank you so much for joining us.
So, sure, great to be here.
Yeah. So before I introduce our other panelists, you have worked in 2 distinctly different branches of our government. Can you share what you have found as the biggest difference between working with the executive branch and working with the legislative branch?
Sure. Yeah, glad to. I had a great 4 years with Senator Booker working on the Hill, and really most recently, I'll say that the Hill can be a very frustrating place, as anyone who ever turns on the television knows. But you see kind of the ups and downs, right? Like in the last year, as we were responding to the COVID pandemic, you saw both sides of the aisle coming together around the CARES Act, for example, right? In the spring of 2020. And just unprecedented assistance to hard-hit communities, small businesses, and people. And then of course you see what's happening today, which is a less collaborative, less bipartisan, less forward-thinking body. And so I'll say I'm thrilled to be on the executive side now, where we can work every single day to try to push progress using the tools that we have, while at the same time kind of pushing Congress to move forward on the agenda.
Excellent, excellent. So glad to have you. Mm-hmm. Our next panelist is Josh Dixon, Deputy Director of the White House Partnerships Office, Senior Advisor for Public Engagement, and the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Josh served as the National Faith Engagement Director for Biden for President and was the Director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Commerce during the Obama-Biden administration. Josh was instrumental in bridging relationships among faith leaders, including evangelicals. Josh is a Harvard man and a Michigan man. And Josh, I have a question for you. First of all, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Sandy. It's great to be with everyone.
As a person who's deeply embedded in the Bible Belt, especially with the evangelicals and so forth, in your listening sessions with our faith leaders, what did you find most surprising as you were engaged with them?
It's a great question, Sandy. And again, thanks for having us here today. I just think one thing that stood out to me is, I don't know if I would call it surprising based off of the work that I've done for a while, but that just, I think, doesn't come across. And, what we see in the media or what we are kind of talked about in the kind of public square is just how much common ground there is and how much interest there is in working together on things and where there are shared priorities. And I think, Chad touched on how that can happen in Congress through the CARES Act and other things like that. And I think we've been working on that in this administration through our work in the vaccination effort, through our work to get information out about emergency rental assistance, and the child tax credit. I think in our work to resettle folks who are coming to this country from Afghanistan, we've seen a lot of interest across the ideological spectrum from folks across the political spectrum. And, at the end of the day, we do have so many shared values and so many core priorities and that I think provide a lot of opportunity, which, folks on this call are no stranger to collaborate and work together. So I think, that's always the message that I try to bring is, we always try to focus on what can we do together as opposed to what we can't. And then that's sort of where things start. And that's where we build relationships and figure out more things to work on together over time. So great to be here, and I'll turn it back to you.
Excellent, excellent. Our next panelist is Paul Riviera, and Paul is the Senior Advisor for Intergovernmental Affairs and Director of Tribal Affairs, and is a member of the White House Council on Native American Affairs. He worked in the Western coalitions for the Biden-Harris campaign, served as a political director of Senator Elizabeth Warren's Western campaign during her 2020 presidential run and her 2018 re-election campaign. Paul has worked for both the Democratic National Committee and as a lobbyist. And before graduating from Dartmouth, Paul was a track standout at Santa Fe Prep. Paul, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Great to be here.
Well, here's my probing question for you. So you were a standout athlete, and I was just wondering, how have you found that experience to serve you well in your work today?
Well, wasn't ready for that one this morning, but I'll say I was actually much more involved with my soccer career, and but I think just in general, team sports prepares you for the work of data administration, the work that you do collaboratively on campaigns and working across, our federal partners here in DC. So, I think bringing that collaborative nature of the work that we do together is really shaped by our collective experiences in through sports and other matters. But I'm just grateful to be here, and I know we have some other fellow athletes here on the call, including my Josh, Luke, and Chad as well. So I don't want to take that spotlight.
Oh, well, excellent response, and thank you so much. Our final panelist is Lucas Mcgowan. He is a senior advisor serving the White House Interagency Council. Luke likes to build ecosystems, whether it's in government, technology, or business, that work for everyone. He founded Dirt Road Consulting in rural Vermont, which led him to heading up Burlington's Community and Economic Development Office and Burlington's Resource and Recovery Center. Luke is an alumni of Harvard, Columbia, and the Frank Carlucci American International School of Lisbon. Luke, where are you there? Have you unmuted?
I'm here, Sandy.
Okay, there you are. There you are. So here's my icebreaker question for you. How valuable do you find your international experience, having been in Portugal and so forth, to shaping your work today?
Well, thank you, Sandy. And I love these questions. I get to learn a little bit about my colleagues. I didn't know, all of their histories. And I certainly wasn't expecting to talk about my time in high school. But yeah, I grew up, my dad served in the State Department, grew up in Portugal, went to an international school. And, I would say the best learning that came out of that was essentially thinking about your place in the world. I grew up in the States and then left and went to a school that had people from, around the world, different experiences, different countries, different languages. And, it very quickly, taught me that, it's important to be humble and think about your place in the world and put yourself in other folks' shoes if you really want to, get along and get things done. So, that's what I'd say there.
Excellent. Excellent. Excellent so much. And you guys are all sitting there going, wow, that Google really does have a lot of information on me, doesn't it?
I got to go scrub my profile now, Sandy.
Oh, there we go. So guys, gentlemen, this is our first question today. And this conference is really helping our partners to build capacity. Can you all talk some of the initiatives that the administration is working on, which advances equity?
Yeah, I can start there, Sandy. So listen, I mean, I'm so glad it's great that we're starting with that question because it's so foundational to how the administration is approaching this work and policymaking more generally. You know, one of the first executive orders that the president signed on day one of his administration was an executive order to do, just that, advance equity in everything we do. And the equity executive order directed every agency, domestic agencies like the EPA and USDA and HUD and HHS, and international agencies, the CIA and the State Department and the Department of Defense and others, to look at what they're doing across all of their programs and services and see what they can do to advance equity, break down barriers to access, and otherwise support underserved communities. And we really define that very broadly. When we think of underserved communities, we think about people in communities of color. We think about rural communities. We think about people with disabilities, places that I know are well represented here, places that have struggled with inequality and poverty, often persistent poverty. And so that's really, the Domestic Policy Council and across the entire government, we're really thinking every day, okay, we have these sets of tools, right? These programs, these grant programs, these loan programs, policies. How are they landing? How, to what extent are all people able to truly, access those programs and services? So that's number one. That's kind of really the ethos of the administration and how we're approaching the work. And we've really seen that play out, right? So American Rescue Plan, equity is just embedded throughout. It was the first, really major legislative accomplishment, back in March, and thinking about direct cash payments to every single low and middle income American, the child tax credit, expanding it to $3,000 to $3,600 per kid, and addressing one of the real injustices of the previous child tax credit, which is that it wasn't fully refundable, meaning that kids and families that didn't make very much weren't able to claim the full credit, while kids and families that made $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year were able to access the full credit. And so, and really made a number of, refinements and changes to our small business programming to make sure that the smallest of small businesses owned by underserved groups that aren't necessarily plugged into the mainstream banking system, that they're able to access much needed resources. And then we've seen that continue with the American Families Plan and the Build Back Better agenda and the infrastructure bill, really, and I think we're going to get at a lot of those economic development, which I know, strategies and programs that have already happened or that are hopefully going to happen in the, should Congress act. But everything from childcare, capping childcare costs at 7% to expanding the child tax credit and extending that for as long as possible, national paid leave program, broadband. So, these are all kind of designed and hopefully will be implemented in ways that advance equity, ensure that everyone's around the table and able to benefit.
Excellent, excellent. I've seen nodding heads of our panelists. Does anybody want to unmute and build on that or add anything? Oh, and that's okay now. Okay.
Oh, Sandy, I can just add really briefly to, Chad gave a phenomenal overview of the ways in which our approaches to everything we're doing is really steeped in racial equity. I would say also the implementation of these things too is really grounded in that. And that's where my office has been really involved, in conjunction with so many other folks across the administration. But our whole approach, whether it's on connecting with folks to ensure they get access to the child tax credit, or getting the word out about rental assistance, or collaborating with folks on vaccine equity and things along those lines, it is based on partnering with trusted voices in local communities. and ensuring that we are doing everything possible so that, in particular, historically disadvantaged communities are getting access to these resources. I think the child tax credit is a great example where it went out automatically to families who made enough money to file taxes the past couple of years. But for folks who did not make enough money to file taxes the past couple of years, who will benefit the most from the child tax credit, they don't automatically receive it, and they have to work through kind of a different channel. So we worked on creating a non-filer portal for folks to be able to access that. And we've been partnering with organizations all around the country, with community-based organizations, racial equity organizations, civil rights organizations, faith-based organizations, you name it. And we're trying to get the word out about this. Encourage you all to get the word out about this as well, because the portal is going to be open for another month and a half or so. But we're really trying to make sure that families have access to that. It's in English and Spanish. We actually partner with Code for America to make it as accessible as possible on mobile as well. So those are some examples on the implementation side of just kind of building off of that great overview that Chad provided.
Very, very good. All right, Mr. Moderator, Austin.
All right, so I'll pose this question first to Luke and then allow others to chime in on it. But we know that increasing interagency collaboration has been a goal of the past several administrations. What steps is the current administration taking to help break down silos and increase interagency coordination and collaboration?
Thanks for that question, Julius. And I should have said at the top, I really think you could have a career as a radio DJ. I think I would tune in to the Julius Jazz and Promise Zone show regularly. But it's a great question, and I think many of the folks on this call certainly probably think about how different agencies can work together to better lives, to help their constituents. And it's a challenge you face at every level of government, certainly. At the very top, we increase, a focus of this administration is increasing lines of communication between White House and the agencies. Our cabinet secretary just today got off a daily call with the chiefs of staff at every federal agency. And today's topic was solely focused on sharing ideas and information. And so that's just kind of one example. I know that, Polly and my boss, Julie Rodriguez, and, Chad's boss, Susan Rice, often, convene interagency policy committees to bring together the right policy leaders and agencies and make sure we are sort of having information flow up. And then also, when initiatives like equity, as we were discussing, when we really want to put our kind of shoulder to the wheel, we're able to do that in a coordinated way. Personally, I serve. So again, I work on IGA, which is intergovernmental affairs. So often working with many folks who I think are out in the office with your state and local government agencies. I also work with our American Rescue Plan implementation team, which, as Chad and Josh referred to, this was our first major initiative, a $1.9 trillion package to address the pandemic and its negative economic impacts. It includes 200 programs. I think every agency has a program that is ARP funded, and that is an enormous implementation challenge. And so we now have a team at the White House that essentially reviews and tracks all those programs, tries to figure out, as Josh was referring to, hey, child tax credit is a priority. We are trying to reach people who are hard to reach across every federal benefits program. We're trying to get them this really meaningful benefit. What can we learn from all of the agencies? So we actually have called together what we call a whole of government approach to tackling this problem. And so we work with, Treasury, to design tools, get information out, but we also work with AmeriCorps, to get AmeriCorps folks trained up to help be navigators. We work with the Department of Education to think about back to school efforts to get information out about child tax credit. Department of Interior to think about, Native American families, making sure that they're informed about the CTC and can enroll. So there's lots of interagency collaboration, and we certainly have not solved the problem, but I think we are getting better every day. And back to you, Julius or Sandy, who's moderating now.
Well, first, I just want to check in and see if anyone wanted to add on to that, and if not, we can move on to our next question.
Julius, I can briefly add on to some of the examples of the work in our Native American portfolio. One of the things that we realized early on in this administration is that we need to implement some type of structure to really bring the interagency work to life. So within the first 100 days, we established the White House Council on Native American Affairs. And this was a council that was established in the Obama administration towards the end, and unfortunately fell dormant during the previous administration, but we really felt that it was an important initiative to tackle, especially considering all the moving parts with the American Rescue Plan and all the things we really wanted to accomplish as an administration. So this council is chaired by Ambassador Rice in the Domestic Policy Council, who leads the Domestic Policy Council, and Secretary Holland from the Department of Interior. And in this council, we've broken up six subgroups to really dive deep on policy issues and deliverables that we want to be able to announce throughout the course of the administration, but also culminating in our Tribal Nations Summit that will happen in early November, which is creeping up on us. I keep saying at the end of the year, but I realize that's coming up sooner than I think. And these subgroups are composed of interagency working groups focused on economic development, energy, and infrastructure. We have a subgroup on climate change, tribal homelands and treaties, another on education, another on health, another on public safety and justice, and another on international issues for the first time, and really focused on different ways that we can collaborate and really, I think at a very basic level, talking with each other and making sure that if there are similar types of programs that we're working jointly together, especially as our tribal communities and our tribal leaders are stretched very thin with their time, and we want to make some of these efforts as easy as possible for them to take advantage of.
Thank you so much, Bowie. I'll pass it over to Sandy for our next question.
Absolutely. And gentlemen, thank you for those insights. Our third question for the panelists today is we know the administration recognizes the impact of place-based initiatives. All promise zones are place-based initiatives, but we're not the only place-based initiatives out there. Can you all discuss some of the work that you all have seen that you all are doing in the area that advances place-based initiatives?
Sure, I can start with that. I think the president and the administration is really committed to place-based work, recognizing that every community, every region has its own sets of not just challenges, but really opportunities and assets. And even just looking at the set of promise zones that you all represent, I mean, there's such diversity in your midst. And so, and also a part of that gets back to, Sandy, your first question, which was, touched on capacity and recognizing that not every place has a Sandy Kurd to really drive a lot of this work. And so we've really been thinking a lot about how do we ensure that we are providing the kind of capacity building and technical assistance so that every community and region, especially those that really need the help the most, are able to access these much needed federal resources. And so that's central to the equity executive order that I mentioned, but it's also really baked into some of what I think are really exciting legislative proposals that are both already being implemented or hopefully will be implemented as part of the Build Back Better agenda. So, you've as part of the American Rescue Plan, the EDA, the Economic Development Agency administration at Department of Commerce was given $3 billion, which they're now, we were talking about this beforehand, Sandy, on, to do this Build Back Better regional challenge. It's just an incredible opportunity to not only invest in capacity building and planning, but then giving real significant, pretty unprecedented flexible funds for communities and regions to actually implement those plans and those visions. So that's number one. Two, you're looking at the Build Back Better agenda, looking at, and I know you all are tracking these things, but I'm so excited, in the rural context for the Rural Partnership Program, which calls for $5 billion to allocate to states to then make big block grants to rural communities and regions, in particular high need, high poverty rural communities and regions, to execute on their plans and their visions. So, we recognize that applying for, every little, across a dozen different programs and several different agencies, that it's, hard. And, if you don't have grant writers, you don't have, philanthropies helping, you don't have big institutions provide, local institutions providing matching funds and, all of these things, it can be really difficult to compete, especially when you're looking at highly competitive funds. And so this will give $5 billion across, all the states, ensuring broad geographic distribution for communities to really execute on their plans and their visions. And so we're really excited about that and hopeful, and cautiously optimistic. It made it through kind of markup and is in both the House and Senate versions of the reconciliation package. And hopefully that'll be a reality. And really, that's one example that I'm personally really excited about. But it really cuts across the entire agenda. There's the Community Revitalization Fund, which calls for $10 billion to make really foundational community wealth building investments in urban and other areas. And so these are all just unprecedented resources to make the kinds of investments in community capacity and really transformational investments that just, haven't been available up to now.
Excellent. Excellent. Did anybody else want to chime in on that? Place-based work? Okay. All righty. Well, Julius, back to you for our next question.
All right. So addressing
sorry, Julius, I'm interrupting. Can I just tack on one more thing?
Yes.
Because it touches on this, and that's, the administration's Justice 40 initiative and efforts, which is, recognizing that not all communities are dealing with the same issues. There are many communities, including, I'm sure, many on this call that struggle with persistent poverty, with pollution, with historic disinvestment. And so recognizing that, very early in this administration, the president signed an executive order to really deliver on a campaign promise, a campaign commitment to execute on what's known as this Justice 40 initiative. And that is to target 40% at least of the benefits of federal investments, certain federal investments, to quote unquote disadvantaged communities. And so we're in the process of implementing that now. But it's very consistent, I think, with kind of place-based thinking. And that is, if we're not intentional about ensuring that high need communities are able to compete and benefit from these programs, it won't happen. And so this ensures that, when we're talking about implementing the infrastructure bill, hopefully, assuming it happens, talking about the Build Back Better agenda, so like infrastructure and broadband and affordable housing, community economic development, ensuring that, disadvantaged communities, the communities that need it most, are getting their fair share.
Very good.
If I could chime in there too, Sandy, just even this morning, in the Julie Rodriguez, Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, we were talking about promise zones, and we're both, alums of the Obama administration, and just really recognize it's one of the lasting legacies, I think, of the Obama administration, was really making place-based initiatives kind of central to the work, and that continues today, through kind of all of the different programs we're talking about. I think we are often realizing that actually the best way to deliver on our goals, whatever the program, is to make sure you have the right community leaders, community representatives in place and sort of integrated into the process in order to get the job done. So just wanted to share that.
Excellent. Thank you. Always love that promise zones are being talked about in other circles. Julius, back to you, sir.
Thank you all so much. So addressing global climate changes through place-based initiatives like promise zones may appear daunting and maybe even appear counterintuitive, Changing the energy use and awareness at an individual level will drive population change. What resources would you recommend Promise Zone partners explore to advance their climate change work?
I'm happy to jump in there and, would invite my fellow panelists as well. I think most folks on this call probably know we're facing kind of a transition of really unprecedented magnitude in our lifetime, certainly. And, we have to ensure that while we're getting the big picture right, decarbonizing the economy, investing in resilience, preventing the catastrophic effects of, storms, fires that are driven by rising global temperatures, we have to make sure that we're meeting communities where they are and making sure that no one's left behind. As is the case with every problem, there's capacity that exists in different levels in different communities to address challenges. And this means, not just supporting the communities with the, at risk of those first order effects of climate change, floods, droughts, fires, but it means supporting communities that have, are dealing with the effects of economic transition. So positioning communities that, former, or transitioning coal communities, for instance, or auto communities, getting them ready for the electric vehicle transition, getting coal communities ready for the renewable fuel transition. That is just as important as getting the technology and the policy right. And that's, Chad referred to the EDA, Economic Development Administration, announcing $3 billion in funding from the ARP focused on building communities back stronger. The infrastructure investment and the Jobs Act and the Build Back Better plan, provide tens of millions of dollars of resources. We still have to get some of these done and passed, but we're confident we will. And, as I think about, the folks on this call, how they need to first raise their hand and say, this is why these are important investments, and help get that message out. This is what it would mean for our community. And then, really hold us to the fire to make sure we're getting those resources to the communities that need the most. I've in former lives, I've had to fill out EDA grants applications, and, it's not the simplest process. And that's why, I feel really committed to making sure that we are helping sort of individuals navigate benefits, but also organizations like those represented by the folks on this call. How do you access the right benefits? And there's lots of interesting programs underway to tackle that. So, that's I talked for a little while there. I'm not sure if Chad or others have anything they want to add.
No, well covered, Luke. Thanks.
All right, well, I'll pass it back over to Sandy.
Well, fantastic. Paul, I believe this question is designed for you. The Biden administration has clearly signaled the importance of tribal nations. Can you discuss some of the work that you guys are doing with the Indian nations?
Sure. Thanks, Sandy, for that question. And I think it's important to recognize that both President Biden and Vice President Harris are no stranger to working with tribal communities. I would say that the Obama administration was probably one of the most forward-thinking and progressive partners for tribal communities, and really looking to build on a lot of that work in this administration. So on day 6 of President Biden's administration, he signed the presidential memorandum on tribal consultation, which directs all federal agencies to consult with tribes on their consultation plans. And as you can imagine, that's a fairly Herculean effort across all agencies to not only consult with tribes, but to create those consultation plans. And those plans are really designed to make sure that tribes have, by design, the opportunity to consult on policies that impact themselves and their communities and support our trust and treaty responsibility to tribal nations. And so I think that's one of the core principles of our administration, is that we really value and support and are interested in advancing that trust and treaty responsibility, advancing tribal sovereignty and tribal self-determination. One of the key ways that we've been able to do that is actually by having our cabinet secretaries and our principals go out to tribal communities and meet with tribal leaders, understanding what the challenges are and what are, some of the big opportunities for us to work collaboratively together. Also, we understand that people are policy, so we've had the opportunity to appoint many Native American members across the administration in key positions. First and foremost, a good friend, Secretary Deb Haaland, appointed and confirmed to be our first Native American cabinet secretary and leading the Department of Interior. So really excited to see that, but also in other key positions like leading Mike Connor to lead the Army Corps of Engineers, or our first general counsel to lead USDA, and so many more across the administration. We could go on here, but I think the point being made that for the first time ever, we've seen record amounts of representation from our community. As Luke mentioned in the American Rescue Plan, this is the most significant funding measure ever for tribal communities. So over $31.2 billion allocated to supporting tribal programs and tribal communities, $20 billion directly through the Department of Treasury, which is, if you look at the cumulative budgets that go out to tribal communities on a regular basis, this is far and above the highest amount ever to support tribal communities. So we were really enthusiastic to see that. As Josh and Luke and Chad mentioned, now the implementation part comes into play. And, we recently had the opportunity to share $20 million in language preservation funding, which was critical to supporting our cultural and economic well-being as our tribal communities, as well as $100 million in EDA grant funding. And just some of the highlights from that is, I think there's many more resources out there that we're rolling out. So, we'll want to make sure that our tribal communities and our tribal leadership are paying close attention. As mentioned, we had the White House Council on Native American Affairs, which we were really proud to stand up in the first 100 days, and really speaks to the commitment of this administration, across the administration, to really bring together our federal partners. In our first council meeting, we had over 11 cabinet secretaries participate for an hour to focus exclusively on tribal issues and what are the ways that we can really move the ball forward from the outset, right? Not as a back burner priority, but really focusing deliberatively on what are the key issues that we can advance. And one of those key issues, including broadband, which we were fortunate enough to be able to start really focusing on how we're rolling out over $1 billion of tribal broadband money through the NTIA, and including what we're working on, Tribal Broadband Summit that's happening as we speak. September 17th was the first day. We have another session tomorrow, and October 1st will be the last day. So for folks that are interested in participating, that's really an opportunity to learn about implementing the tribal broadband and connectivity grant and providing other technical solution and long-term success resources. So there's certainly a lot of opportunities for tribes. We have the Tribal Nation Summit with the president happening later in the year. And that'll really be our keynote activity that tribal leaders will have to engage with the administration. So that's just some brief highlights there. I think the exciting thing is that we've had the chance to collaboratively work with Chad and Josh and Luke on the tribal portfolio. It's not a portfolio that exclusively exists with me. I have my partner in the Domestic Policy Council, Libby Washburn. So it's our communities are well represented in the White House and throughout the administration.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pawi. We did have and I'm not trying to jump to the questions and answers, but one of our attendants or audience has asked to share opportunities for the tribal nations out of Choctaw. We will connect you, Ms. Ruby, with those resources after this conference is over. And Pawi, I will tell you that I'm so glad you encouraged the visits. All 4 of our tribal promise zones will share with us us on a regular basis when they have received a federal visit and how much they enjoy doing that and hosting the opportunity to show off their nations to our federal government. So with that, oh, and Julius, I guess we should remind our audience that questions and answers should be entered into the chat so that we can catch folks immediately following our questions and of our panelists. But back to you for our next one.
All right. Before I ask this next question, I have to first say go blue to my fellow Michigan man, Josh, as I pose this two-part question to you, sir. The first part is, what is the biggest misconception regarding the White House Office of Faith-Based Organizations in Neighborhoods? And then the second part is, are there new initiatives this office is working on that we should be aware of?
Yeah, thanks for that, Julius, and absolutely go blue. 3-0 right now. Got a big game this weekend. So I think these are great questions. I think the biggest thing is they're just misunderstandings about the mission of the office and what it actually does. The office has been around since the Bush administration. In 2001, it was actually the first executive order that President Bush signed. It's existed under each successive administration since, and had an executive order that kind of aligned it to the objectives of that administration. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the Office of Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships is supported by both the Domestic Policy Council and the Office of Public Engagement by executive order for the first time. So Melissa Rogers works out of the Domestic Policy Council. I work out of the Office of Public Engagement, and so it has that that extra collaborative element to it. And we have really 5 key priorities that are based in this core mission of promoting partnerships to help people in need. And that's really, at the end of the day, what the work is. It's a lot of on the ground programmatic focus. And so what our 5 priorities are right now, and this is kind of like where the work falls under, working to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and really increase access and equity to the vaccines. Second is pursuing racial equity in every way, shape, and form that we're able to through the different agency centers that we have and through our White House presence. Third is working to expand opportunity for historically disadvantaged communities, kind of aligning to some of what Chad was sharing earlier. Fourth is working to expand humanitarian aid. Right now that is looking like some of the work we're doing around COVAX and vaccine access, but then also responding to kind of different things that come up on the international front, including the Afghan resettlement effort. And then fifth is working on protecting religious pluralism and promoting things along those lines. And so our office very much is kind of based on working across the federal government. We have 11 different centers at federal agencies by executive order. And so we work not only through the White House office, but then also through these subsidiary agencies. So like right now, for example, our HUD center is focused on getting the word out about rental assistance. They're doing a lot of work around that. They're very involved in the House America program over at HUD, which is focused on addressing homelessness. They're doing a lot to connect with and learn about best practices around housing and how different communities are doing it right, and how they can learn from them. So, we have those centers, again, at 11 different agencies, at the Department of Education, the Department of Agriculture, the Small Business Administration, the Department of Commerce, and more. And so we can make sure to get information out to everyone about that. And I think it's just a couple of good opportunities for folks to plug into in terms of some new things we're doing this administration. So one is we're trying to just communicate on a very regular and recurring basis with people about different programs that are out there. And I think when I was serving at the Center for Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships at the Commerce Department, what stood out to me so much is how many great programs we had that nobody knew about. And it's so important to get the word out about how folks can plug into things, whether it's grant and loan opportunities, whether it is government programs that have been passed by Congress and have been appropriated and are just out there for folks to take advantage of, like the child tax credit for non-filers, like rental assistance, whether it's other types of technical assistance that are offered, things along those lines. we try to make sure that folks know about those as they are rolled out on a regular basis. And we come back to them. We don't just say, hey, this is rolled out, great. If you missed that call, then, sorry. We try to continue to let people know about all these different things that are going on and how they can be a part of these efforts in their communities. We kind of operate under this philosophy, which I think is very much sums up how this administration is oriented: real things for real people. And, at the end of the day, that's our job is to really execute on real things for real people. That's really what the American Rescue Plan was about, the Build Back Better agenda, the infrastructure deal. And so on our end, we host a call every week on Thursday at noon. It's usually about a 30-minute call where we highlight key programs and other things. I actually need to run to that in just a minute here. But we talk about, for example, today, we're going to talk about, we're going to update on the Afghan resettlement effort. We're going to talk about economic injury disaster loans from the Small Business Administration, especially for folks that were kind of in that zone impacted by Hurricane Ida. And we're going to talk about the Housing America program from HUD. Last week we focused a bit on the president's COVID-19 action plan, touched on some Hispanic Heritage Month things, and we make sure to keep people up to speed on what's happening on a regular basis. We'll make sure to share the link out for how folks can sign up to be a part of those calls, as well as get invited to briefings and get our newsletter, which kind of summarizes and provides links to all these different resources that we share on a regular basis. So that's one of the big things that we're trying to orient around in this administration, is just being as accessible as possible and making sure that as these big bills are rolled out, as many folks know how to access the resources from them and to share that information with their communities.
All right. Thank you so much, Josh. I just want to check in. You have another commitment that you have to add to. Is that correct? So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that awesome answer. And I also want to thank you for being here and being on our panel. And unfortunately, we have to say goodbye. And I want to let everyone know before Josh goes, we did not plan on matching jackets, but it's just the Michigan difference.
Michigan difference. Go blue, always. Leaders in the best. Yeah. Thanks so much, Julia. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, everyone. And look forward to staying in touch. And Sandy, I'll send over those resources to you so you can share them out.
That'd be super. And we will get folks signed up for those to participate in that. I know that in the time that we've had a Kentucky Promise Zone, we have touched base with the White House Office of Faith-Based Organizations numerous times. And your all's power of convening has been remarkable for bringing in our faith-based organizations to work on economic issues. Folks, we got one last question here before we turn and look at the audience's questions. And it is, we've talked a lot about what the White House is doing and the priorities and so forth, but what can we as a Promise Zone Coalition, what can our members and our partners do to help place-based initiatives and to advance the administration's agenda? So in other words, what can we do for you all?
I like that question, Sandy. So there is so much that folks can do, especially on these calls, on this call, that I think it's our shared goals. And it's, as we've talked about a couple times right now, the president's Build Back Better agenda is really central to our work. And it's a kind of a critical piece of what I think the Promise Zone Coalition works on and recognizes that's important. It's not just infrastructure. We have our infrastructure package, but it's generational investments in human infrastructure, social infrastructure, and other critical priorities like clean energy, as we talked about, to address the climate crisis. That's what the Build Back Better agenda is about. It's revitalizing our education system. It's ensuring that no middle-class family pays more than 7% of their income for high-quality childcare. It means extending the child tax credit. It's instituting paid family and medical leave, and it expands home care for older and disabled Americans. And the list goes on, but it's really about investing in communities. And it doesn't happen without your help. The folks on this call really could do two things. One is sharing the impacts that this agenda will have on your communities, and vocalizing that need in your community, the need for action. You have networks to reach folks on Capitol Hill, just sort of lifting up your voices and making that clear. We're encouraging folks to do this right now. As this is currently being deliberated in Congress, there's no more important time for folks to see what's in the plan. If it resonates, take a moment to share that and let other people know, and then let us know about it in White House Intergovernmental Affairs. We want to lift up those messages and bring attention to them. So that's just two things that folks could do today to help that cause. And I don't know, Chad or Pawi, anything I missed?
Nope. No, thanks, Luke. Always excited to, and just a generic, open door, we want to hear from you all. We're obviously laser focused on implementing the agenda and getting it through Congress. And that's our top priority right now. But we've got a long administration here, I hope, and we'll want to hear from you all on, as we think through new policy and how current policy isn't working, so we can make sure that we're, working collaboratively, to make sure that, we're all benefiting from the progress that we're trying to push for.
And then I would just add, lastly, really appreciate all of your help thus far, and we'll continue to ask for your support and making sure that your community members know the opportunities that are become available, whether they're different funding measures or efforts that the administration's working to get out the word on CTC and other initiatives that really need our grassroots and community leaders to amplify that message. So I just want to thank Julius and Sandy for having us on today to present.
Oh, and we thank you. And it turns out our audience is thanking you also. We've got questions. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump in there. This one comes from Beth out of Philadelphia, and it's regarding the child tax credit. She says, here in Philadelphia, we've been investing significant local resources and outreach in our Promise Zone and the entire city. So one, what is the White House thinking about extending that October 15th deadline for the electronic filings to claim the advanced CTC? It would be great to have the rest of the year to continue connecting folks to the CTC via portal and Vita sites. So that's the first question. And anybody want to?
That's a great question. And I don't want to speak for Luke. If you have, why don't you nod your head if you want to get in here? Otherwise I can.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and certainly extending the expansion of the CTC is an important piece of the Build Back Better agenda that we were talking about. So that's one thing folks can do. We're also we've met with the mayor and his team to talk about child tax credit enrollment strategies. A key for today, what we can do, and also the prospects of extension, is solving that last mile problem of making this work. We've got a tool, it's live right now, it's been made more accessible. We still haven't enrolled and reached all the families that need to go through that tool. And we are eager to partner to get that work done, right now. So please, get in touch, and maybe Chad, if there's anything else you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, no, I think that's right on. And there seems to be kind of like a specific kind of timeline question there. And I don't know the answer to that and what's being contemplated by the Treasury folks. So and we don't have access to the sidebar, it sounds like there's a comment section, so I don't see those. But if Sandy, if you want to share that, I'm happy to we can try to track down an answer to that specific question too.
Okay, well, we'll definitely do that. We'll get to Evan, Beth's contact. She also had another note on this. Treasury has been very limited in the data they can share to assist in targeting our outreach beyond some zip code level and aggregate data. She would love to work with the White House and Treasury to better utilize the data for a more targeted, effective outreach. So she's throwing out a hey, I'd love to help if somebody is there. And now let's see here, Mr. Julius, can you see there was another question in there?
Yeah, we have an awesome question from Julia Griffith. And the question is about coal communities and clean energy. She states that our school is launching a program that will offer curriculum to students and adults in the community who are unemployed that will result in various certifications that will provide a smooth transition into either higher education or the workforce in their area. In relation to readying coal communities for the transition to renewable energy, are there any resources or some basic career pathway suggestions you can offer that will aid us in our effort to prepare our citizens for job placement in that field as it approaches our local communities? It's a wonderful question.
Yeah, it really is. And I'd love to, again, follow up on it so to make sure that we're answering comprehensively. I mean, I will say that I hope you're taking a close look at the EDA Build Back Better Regional Challenge, which is really, designed for those kinds of approaches, among other things. And so that feels like a really important opportunity. This is really central to our design thinking, policy design work across a whole host of programs. I mentioned the Rural Partnership Program, for example, and that's really going to be, looking very closely at, quote unquote, distressed communities focused, who are dealing with economic transition. I expect a lot of those projects, were they to be funded, they would be focused on workforce. Kind of stay tuned on that piece, of course. But we've got a whole team of folks at the Domestic Policy Council and National Economic Council focused on workforce. I'm not one of them, but if you again pass along the question to Evan, Sandy, we're happy to follow up with more specific resources.
Excellent. Folks, we have reached the end of our hour, and we just, I cannot. I mean, the words to just the amount of time and energy that you guys have given us, we are so appreciative. And we just want you to know that we're the wind behind you guys and the work that you're doing. And we're just we're just here for you. It's one big community. And I think Julius has a few words to share with our group regarding our next sessions. But again, thank you so much for being with us today.